Hello and welcome to my presentation for Kohlberg's theory of morality development. My name is Emiliano Pittick, also known as Eli. This is for the critical thinking class. The ID number is IDS 3355. Hello, Dr. Salvage and anybody else watching. Let's get started. So, before we get into Kohlberg's moral development theory and the stages and sub-stages and all that, we have to define what is morality. Well, morality is basically what dictates a person to believe what is right and wrong, right? So obviously, you know, most people will come to the conclusion that murder is bad, killing people is bad. Now, how we get to that conclusion and what motivates us to get there, that's where the theory of development, Kohlberg's theory comes into play. There is also one study by Warner, Fortin, and Melkonian that suggests that the moral development and Kohlberg's theory actually does affect decision making and ethics ultimately, and what stage a person is in determines a lot of the times their behaviors in certain situations, right? Um, so that's what that reference is for. And now that we've established what morality is, basically just determining, you know, a person's opinion on what is right or wrong. Let's go to the next slide. Lawrence Kohlberg. This is just a very, very brief biography. Don't want to get too much into it. He was born in Bronxville, New York. Passed away in 1987, allegedly due to suicide, but it's not confirmed. Um, he did have a lot of influence from Jean Piaget, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. He had a stage-based theory of development, which was only really two stages, but Kohlberg expanded on that and added and suggested there's actually more stages beyond just the rigid two-tier system that Piaget offered. There's actually more than that, and a lot of people, as you'll see, they don't even get to the last two stages of development. It's actually exceedingly rare, according to Kohlberg, and based on what he's found. So um, he received his bachelor's degree in psychology in just 1 year, which is phenomenal. One moment, my cat likes to get in the way sometimes. Hopefully, he won't try to make a guest appearance, right? Very basic overview. Let's continue. This is Kohlberg's theory of moral development, right? As our textbook suggests, this is straight from Boss and her CritThink textbook, or it's just Think actually. Sorry, it's just critical thinking. It's based on three overarching levels. So I mentioned there's six. There's two levels in each of these stages here, right? So the pre-conventional morality stage, that is very young. You're still trying to figure things out. You're still a kid, right? Conventional stage is your average sense of morality that people kind of land on, right? There's stages 3 and 4 there. People usually land on one of those. And then there's the final stage, the post-conventional morality stage, which, as the name might suggest, it comes after that average stage that we all, usually land on. And a lot of people don't reach this stage. They don't actually get to post-conventional. Most people think in terms of conventional morality. What are these stages? Well, the first stage, stage 1, is a kid's sense of morality and what drives them to make decisions, what's right and wrong, is basically fueled by whether they're going to get punished or not, right? There's there's not a developed independent moral reasoning, and what I mean by that is the child doesn't have a lot of knowledge on what is right or wrong without the guidance of what somebody else already told them. And what they tell them is usually reinforced with either reward or punishment, right? So a kid doesn't want to do something because they don't want to go to timeout, right? pretty easy to understand. A lot of us have been here. You know, when I was a kid, I did this a lot, right? You know, in elementary school, there's these things called the referrals, right? So basically, you get marked if you did something bad, and that would be reported to your parents. And if you get, you know, 3 referrals in a year, then you're at risk of like expulsion, right? So that threat of punishment, um, you know, it really kind of drove me to not do certain things. Now, I wasn't a terrible kid, right? But I did, you know, I used like bad language, you know, like the F words and stuff like that, and you do get reprimanded for that, right? Even though, you know, one could argue, is it morally right or wrong to say the F word? Who knows, really, right? But as a kid, you're driven by, hey, it is morally wrong to say that. Why? Because I'm going to get punished for it, right? Or, like I said, vice versa. Kids are motivated to do something good if they get rewarded for it, right? I used to go to the dentist, um, and, you know, I hated the dentist, but my mom, she incentivized me to go and would sometimes give me like some from Toys R Us, right? You know, like Legos or something, you know, something that kind of um, put in like what you did was good, right? You went to the dentist, that's a good thing. So I'm gonna reinforce that. So there's a little bit of you know, you can get into conditioning and all that, but just staying on topic with Kohlberg's theory of development, this stage is solely based on the kid's feelings and, you know, basically um, the consequences of their actions. That's what people at this stage are fueled by, and I'm sure we've all been there, you know, absolutely. And I'm sure sometimes, um, you know, some decisions we make are still kind of fueled by whether we're going to be punished by it or not, instead of some developed sense of morality. You know, if we don't know the subject, right? Um, the next stage will be the pre-conventional stage, part two. Um, this is where kids start to kind of develop their own sense of, you know, right or wrong, but it's still based off of what's in it for me, right? It's a very self-centered kind of point of view. Um, it still acknowledges that other people have different views, but they might project that, you know, their sense of like what's in it for me onto others, right? So they might think that others think the same way, um, which could be like a feedback loop, you know, in some ways, right? Um, in this stage, stage two, individuals are mostly selfish. You know, whether others kind of get something in return is irrelevant to the person because they just want to, you know, again, that the real emphasis is on what's in it for me. I know it's kind of cut off here because my head's blocking it, but yeah. Um, exchanges are motivated by how we feel towards the situation. There's not really much nuance to it. It's just kind of it is what it is. You know, they just individuals at this point. And again, I'm sure we've all been there. I've been in there. You know, um, when I was younger, I would often skip school because I didn't see any value in it. I didn't see anything in it for me to go to school because, you know, my sense of morals drove me to think I would rather be doing this instead, you know, anything else really. I mean, that's what my mindset was because I didn't see the value in it because my mindset was basically what's in it for me? What am I going to gain from going to school, right? I didn't think I would gain much. Well, I was wrong, obviously, but you know, at a certain point, we all do have that faulty thinking, right? We think in a self-centered way, but we eventually grow out of it, right? And at least in the next stage, conventional morality. This is where interpersonal relationships um, are kind of driving the motivation on what someone thinks what's right and wrong. Um, you know, they base they base their sense of morality off of what others will think and how they will react to what I do or don't do in a certain situation. This is where conformity happens. You know, I referenced the bystander effect. Fredericks and a few other researchers suggest that the bystander effect happens because of a diffusal of responsibility, and this diffusal ultimately comes from a sense of morality that states, hey, you know, somebody else is going to do it because there's so many people around me. why should I move? Everyone else is doing the same thing I'm doing, right? Um, so why should I be the outlier to act when no one else is doing it? And if I were to do it, how would other people react to me? Would it be negative or positive? This is kind of where people might fall into a trap, and I've been there too, where you're kind of stuck in ambiguity, where you don't know what you're gonna do. Um, what others seem to think in this stage kind of reigns supreme. Um, you know, people are, and going back to the diffusion of responsibility idea, people are just kind of afraid what others might think, basically. And our drives at this point is kind of is more external instead of internal motivation. It's more like uh, basically conformity, right? I know I've said it quite a bit here, but just trying to stay with the norm and not really shake the boat, even if the boat is going to go down a waterfall, right? People are afraid to mention that, hey, there's a waterfall ahead. Maybe we should do something. Um, it's just another example. We've all been there. When I was younger, I would see people get bullied, just like this picture here, and I wouldn't really do anything because I was afraid, one, of being the victim myself, too, right? And that goes into like what the bully would think of me, and also that sense of conformity where you don't want to be the odd man out. You kind of just you, you don't want to stand out, basically, and you don't want others to look at you negatively or a different way. Um, it's not, this stage is not. It's definitely lacking in development because you don't have your own sense of what's right or wrong. It's kind of just based off of others around you. Um, and that can be problematic sometimes, when you're in an echo chamber, for example, you get stuck in these sometimes radical ideologies that become even more radicalized because there's nobody around you that is willing to go out of the way and say, hey, what you're saying is wrong. Um, you know, but I digress. That's the conventional stage three. Mostly, the gist of it is just people focus on what others think instead of you know like a more developed sense of their own morality, right? All right, the fourth stage is an unconventional morality is where basically people follow laws in place under the assumption that they're there for a reason. Okay, um, this is probably the one that people land on the most, according to Kohlberg. Most people stop developing around this stage, and they kind of just follow the laws regardless of why they're in place, sometimes without even knowing why they're in place. It's like this almost leap of faith that people have towards government and officials simply because they are government officials, right? Milgram study, where he did an experiment. There was an authority figure that told somebody to up the voltage on someone doing a test. That person taking the test would be shocked every time they got a wrong answer. So now that person was an actor, so they would continuously get wrong answers, while the participant that would up the voltage was under the assumption that the test taker also had heart problems, right? So, but these people continued to, follow what the authority figure said, regardless of the distress caused to them and the test taker, seemingly, right? Because they were under the assumption that he was actually getting hurt when he wasn't. Um, and they just followed authority figures. That's a great example of this stage of development. Um, you know, People just kind of assume laws are there for a good reason, and I was in the same boat. I would always think adults in a room have it all figured out, but I think that's faulty thinking. We don't always have it figured out. Me as an adult now, I know that too, right? So next stage will be the post-conventional morality stage. We're finally in the rarer stages. This is the top of the pyramid. This is where people's motivations are driven by a social contract. They want to help society as a whole. If they want to, they do things for the better good of everybody, even if it hurts themselves. You know, um, a lot of great leaders in the past, fall into this category, right? Um, I consider myself to be in post-conventional stages. Now, I'm sure a lot of people consider themselves to be, um, but a lot of what drives me, especially with my plans to be a counselor in the future after I graduate, is I want to help people, but I also want people to help others, right? I kind of want this ripple effect where if I can help somebody, maybe I can help them help someone else, which at the end of the day benefit society as a whole, right? And that's kind of the general premise behind this stage. Um, Laws are questioned, you know, things like slavery, right? That's a good example. Abraham Lincoln was certainly in this stage because he thought slavery was bad, right? Crazy thought at the time. Um, and a lot of people didn't like him for that, you know. Uh, like I said, my personal example is, my own future plans for counseling, and my motivation behind that is for the greater good, right? Next stage will be the post-conventional stage. I feel like I had to put a picture of Martin Luther King because he is such a good example of this. This is where individuals have identified universal principles of morality, and that's what drives them to, to do things, and decide what's right and wrong, right? Unjust laws are questioned. That's the main focus between this stage and the previous one in post-conventional morality. Um, and people are guided by a sense of genuine compassion towards others. I know it's kind of cut off because of my face here, um, but this is a very, very late stage, rare level of development. Martin Luther King Jr., again, great example, but also a rare one, right? You don't see that a lot. Um, I like to think I've developed a universal sense of, morality. Um, you know, when I look at what's going on in the world, I try to look at it from all angles, right? Wars going on, and I'm driven by a sense of just general human decency. Like what I constitute right and wrong might be different from others, but that's because of a difference of interpretation of morals, not necessarily different morals, right? Because we all know rape is bad, we all know murder is bad, but how does someone get to the point, where they think it's good? Well, that's a difference of interpretation. Without getting off on too much of a tangent here, post-conventional morality, um, it's a willingness to do the greater good for others while putting yourself potentially in harm, right? It's a very almost martyr like position sometimes, yeah. And then finally, just a brief summary, of each of the stages here, and the average age of where people are or would be in that stage. Obviously, subject to change. Some people stop at a stage, right? So this is just a general outline of what this looks like. Universal principles are here behind my head. Uh, you know, just a general outline. And I hope that anybody watching this learn a little bit of something about what constitutes morality and how people get to believing certain things. And Kohlberg's theory does have some weight to it universally. A lot of I do think that these principles can be applied across the world. Generally. Here are my references. Um, Again, some of it is blocked off because of my head, but that's okay. These will be provided in the description as well. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate Dr. Salvage for your tutelage and your opportunity. This has been a fantastic class. I've learned quite a bit. When I came into this thinking, critical thinking, it's just critical thinking, right? But no, I actually learned quite a bit. So thank you again. This is a fantastic course. I highly encourage anybody to look into Kohlberg. that's watching this, and just psychology as a whole, if that's what piques your interest. Thanks, and have a great day.